welcome back to Furniture Flipping Teacher. I'm Lauren, and we are at our storage unit, as you can tell. I have decided that we are going to take another look at this dipped dresser that I did during the 12 days of Flipmas, and we're gonna give it a little bit of a second go around makeover. So we're gonna bring this on. All right, we made it home. So let's do a little story time before I get started. I flipped this piece back in November, actually. The video aired in December, but it's been on the market for about 2 months now. And typically, I like to wait it out. I have patience and I'll just wait for that right buyer to come along. And I am totally okay with doing that, but this dresser has actually had like a ton of controversy on like if it looks good or if it doesn't look good. It really, you either love it or you hate it. Except for me, I'm kind of in the middle. I don't really know if I like it or not. So we are gonna give it its second makeover here today. We're going to just add a little bit to make it a little bit more desirable. I feel like there is just such a drastic change in color here between the dark green and then the lighter wood tone. So we're gonna change that up a little bit. I'm not gonna give you too much of my details, but I've asked you guys over on Instagram and you guys came through. You guys told me so many different ideas that you had, and so I'm going to execute some of those ideas on this second makeover of this 80s style dresser. So I've gone back and forth with the color that I want to paint. I'm actually gonna be painting the whole entire dresser, but before I get into any of that, I need to clean it off. Now, I'm not gonna go and do anything crazy with like a degreaser or anything, because honestly, it's just been sitting in our storage unit for about a month, so it really hasn't had the chance to get many oils or much dirt on it. It's just the dust that I want to wipe off and have a clean surface before I start the whole process. Nothing too crazy. We don't even have too much dust on that, but it's still important to get all of the dust off as you can. You may see that there are a little few spots with some damage on the painted part of the dresser, and that's just honestly because we weren't being very careful when we moved it, and also I slid an entire piece of plywood over the top of it, so the paint came off a little bit, but it was in great shape, ready to be sold. Now that we are all cleaned off, I am going to grab my Surf Prep sander. Because I've already done a lot of the sanding work, it's not going to be too big of a job, but I do want to make sure that I smooth out some of the areas. So I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. And if you ever have a project that, you know, is sitting for a while and you want it to move quicker, just making it over a tad bit like I'm going to do could completely change the look of it and then allow someone else to purchase it because maybe they liked it a little bit better. So just keep that in mind. I just want to reiterate that because not every single project is a home run right off the bat. So I know it's hard to see on the video, but this line is actually raised a bit because if you remember, the first time I made this dresser over, there was a piece of tape here and I even top coated over it so that there would be no bleed through. Therefore, there is like a little line here. It's just like a little bump. So what I'm gonna do with my sander is I'm gonna smooth that out a little bit so that when I do end up painting the top as well, it's all going to be like the same level of paint, and it's not gonna even seem like this has more coats of paint on it than this. Now I don't need to go all the way down to raw wood down here. It's okay to paint over paint as long as the finish is, you know, bonding, and there's no way that this is coming off, you know, it passes the scratch test for sure. So with that being said, I don't need to go ahead and sand the whole thing, but I may smooth it out just a little bit to give me a nice fresh surface. And now just like every time after sanding, I grab my microfiber cloth and wipe back all and any of that dust that was created by sanding. Typically the dust is gonna stick to the microfiber cloth. So you can see there are a few areas where when I was sanding, it did end up going down underneath that paint finish and sort of breaking through the paint. That's totally okay. That just means that that specific paint wasn't like completely adhered in those areas. And so I'd rather that go away than stay on there and possibly come off later. But those areas that it does look like there's no paint, they're all still smoothed out. So there's not gonna be any difference in like height. And then also the areas here between the green and the raw wood, those were all able to be smoothed out as well. So again, whenever I paint this section and this section again, it'll all be one flat, even section. So I am going to be building a base for the bottom of this dresser just to elevate it off of the ground a little bit and give it a little bit more character and a little bit more interest down below here. So every single dresser is different when it comes to how it's structured, how it's created, and what the bottom looks like, etc. So I've done this one other time, and of course, it is completely different underneath this dresser than it was with that dresser. So if you are doing a base, just keep in mind that different dressers are going to be different. You're gonna have to do different things for different dressers. With that being said, I am going to have to do a little bit of deconstruction before I can actually put those legs on, because I want to make sure that it's just going to be completely and totally structurally sound when I get done. Okay, now that I took those pieces of wood off the bottom here, we've got a pretty flat surface for me to go ahead and add the base. One thing that I am going to do though is I'm going to be cutting down a piece of plywood and making like a solid base all the way across. That way there is more support, and again, I can go ahead and screw that base directly into the bottom of that piece of plywood. So the piece of plywood that I grabbed from the hardware store was 8 feet, and the dresser is not 8 feet, so I need to trim it down a bit. I went ahead and set up my guide here that I can use to keep my circular saw butted up against so that I get a straight cut all the way across. Okay, so first cut is done. Now I've got to do a cut this way because my dresser is only 15 inches wide. Okay, I'm gonna go do a little test fit just to make sure that I got the right measurements and that it all came out okay. It's like a tiny bit too long, but I think it's because of this extra plywood that like stuck on here, the glue. So I chisel that off. So I was able to grab some scrap wood that we had on hand and go ahead and make 2 more braces right here on each side, as well as put the original one back in the middle. I just had to move it down a little bit, but now we are pretty much all squared away. That way this piece of plywood can just slide right in and I can screw it into the supports that I made here, and that way it's just fully supported, and when we put the base on, the base will be able to screw directly into the actual plywood. Now I'm going to secure the bottom here to the actual piece, and I'm going to do that by just drilling some holes for some wood screws to hold everything in. I went ahead and marked the edges here so that I knew exactly where my support was so I could screw right into it. One last little measure of securedness is some brad nails. I think we're secure. So now we get to measure for our base. Our next step, like I said, is to attach the base to the bottom here. But first we've got to measure and cut and assemble the actual base. So with that being said, I'm going to be using these boards for my base. And typically, the other time that I did this base, I used red oak, and that's a hardwood, but for some reason, they don't have the red oak in the 2x2 anymore at my Home Depot. So I went ahead and went with the Select Pine. So this is gonna be more of a soft wood, and that does matter because of the type of screws that we're gonna be using, but it's basically the same process as far as creating it goes. So the 2x2 is going to act as the legs once I cut it down, and then the 1x3 here is going to be acting as just like the supports and the actual base that you can see across the front. So when I am measuring for this piece first, I need to account for these legs because they are going to be in the corners here. And so if I don't account for those, this piece will be too long. So since this 2x2 is really a 1.5 by 1.5, because you know, wood measurements are crazy weird, that means that I need to subtract 3 inches from whatever measurement my base is going to be from end to end. So it is gonna sit down just a tad bit from the actual bottom, because this new bottom that we created is probably about a 1/2 inch inset. And I kind of like that because that way you can't really see if there's any sort of bowing or anything. So I'm going to measure here, and it should honestly be the exact same measurement that I did with the plywood, which is the 60.5, which it is. And then again, we'll need to subtract 3 inches off of that. So that will end up being 57.5. So that is how long I am going to go and measure for this guy. And then the same thing we will do. This measurement was the 15 1/8. Well, now it's 15. Okay, 15. So that one will be 12 inches because we need to account for those 3. So 2 12-inch pieces and 1 57.5-inch piece. Let's go make some cuts. So essentially this will be here. These two will be here, like so. And then the last thing that we will need to do is account for how tall I want the feet to be on this piece. So I've done 8 inches before, and I feel like that was just like a bit tall. I wanna measure how tall the actual piece itself is right now as it stands. That's at about 30 inches. So 36 inches sounds like it would be like right about where would be like a normal height. That would be right here. I feel like a normal height of a dresser is like about my waist height. Let's do about 6.5 inch legs. And then with that 1/2 inch of dip below the base here, we'll end up with about 6 inch legs. I think that should work. Time to take this guy out and make the legs. Moment of truth. Did I do my measurements correctly? I do not know. I hope so. Looks like it needs about like a sliver off. It's like a sliver off. That's not too bad. Everything else seems to be perfect. I just need to go and cut this like a teeny tiny bit. My teeny tiny bit was perfect because it'll be nice to have it snug in there. Oh! I can't even see like, you know, what it's actually gonna look like, but it looks pretty cool. Okay, now time to grab out my pocket hole maker, my Craig jig. I have the Craig jig pocket hole jig 700 series. So this is sort of like one of the more substantial size Craig jigs, but there are tons of them that pretty much do the same thing. It just depends on like what other tools you may need to use with it. This one has a built-in clamp, therefore I don't have to have any other clamps to help me drill the holes to hold it down. But what I'm going to be doing is drilling some pocket holes to connect all of my wood pieces together. I'm just going to be drilling them on to the flat pieces, not the square legs, but the goal is so that the pocket holes go toward the edges so that they can then be screwed into the legs, and then they'll also go down, and those will be to attach to the bottom of the dresser for the entire dresser to be attached to it so the base won't fall off. So I'm just going to go ahead and line up my piece of wood here, and then the Craig jig actually requires a pocket hole drill bit, and so this will typically come with the Craig jig that you get, so keep that in mind. You do have to use this. This is actually what creates the pocket hole. There are a lot of directions to it, and I'm not going to go into too much depth right now with it because again, every single dresser is different and every single base could be different depending on the type of wood you use, the width of the wood and the sizes and different things like that. But they do a really great job in the instructions and on their website of explaining exactly like where you need to make your holes and how many you should make and which screws you should use. So as you can see, we've got 2 going toward this side, 2 going toward that side. Those will be going straight into the legs, and then these are going straight downward, and those will be going to the base. So this is how it will go on, and you won't even be able to tell that there are any screws in the back because the front of it, there's no screws visible. So I'm gonna do that on these other 2 as well. All of the holes are drilled. Now it's time to actually assemble. Okay, I did a quick trial run and I got the first leg attached to the side here. It was really easy. Last time I had a ton of trouble and I think it had to do with the hardwood and stuff like that, but this is really easy to screw in. So I'm gonna continue on with the rest of the attaching the legs and then we'll attach it to the base as well. Now our last step with the base, until I might stain it or something, is to now put the pocket holes down into the plywood here. Wow, I am very proud of myself. I didn't give up. I was able to do it in like record time. Like I said, I've only done this one other time, but I had to stop like 3 times and it took me probably 3 days to complete just the base portion. So I'm proud of myself, but that also shows you guys that I am not a professional. I'm not an expert at everything. And so if you want to try something new, give yourself time, give yourself grace and patience, and just taking a step back and then coming back to a project is perfectly okay, or trying again another time is totally okay to do. So we are going to flip this dresser over and see if the base is actually even, or if it's wobbly, or anything else. And then we will talk about the paint color. It's even. I mean, the garage floor, you know, you can only do so much with that, but it's not like but so I'll take it. It's a lot higher now too, which is good, I think. And then it just gives it a little bit of interest down below. And once we have it all painted and then the base down here, I'm not probably gonna keep it that light color. I might darken it up just a tad bit. But now it's time to move on to the paint color. So of course I don't wanna get paint on the brand new base. So I'm just taking a bit of painter's tape and putting it directly underneath so that I don't ruin my brand new job with the base. All right, I went back and forth on whether or not I was gonna keep the same color green. And if you're interested in this color, it is called Wilderness by Lily Moon Paint. It is absolutely beautiful. However, since we're just completely revamping this, I decided we're gonna go with a new color. Instead of the green, we're gonna go with black. So this color is called Black Lace. And it is also by Lily Moon Paint, and it's their all-in-one formula, the Opulent line. So again, no primer, no top coat necessary. We're gonna do 2 coats of the black all over the entire dresser, and we'll be good to go. Done with coat number 1. And as you can tell, the spots where I painted with green previously, there's getting tons better coverage of the black because it's already a dark color. And then the wooden part that was much lighter is gonna definitely look better with more coats as I go, and we're gonna get better coverage. But it's looking great. So we'll come back for coat number 2 once it's dry. number 2 is done, and it is pretty much dry, at least on the drawers. So I went ahead and put some back in the dresser, left them out a bit so they don't stick. But I am going to add a little pizzazz in the top 3 drawers. And I picked up this peel and stick wallpaper on Amazon. I will link it down below. But I really want to start just, I guess, paying a little bit more attention to the details in my furniture flips, and like just showing people that I care. I'm going a little bit an extra mile to make this piece of furniture the best that it can be. And so I decided that instead of just leaving the drawers like this, even though they're pretty clean, I thought that this wallpaper would really add that little interest in the top, and that way when you open it you can see like, oh, that is a pretty cool little addition in there. So I already cut it down to size, and all you do is peel off the back and stick it right into the bottom, and it's actually very easy. I usually just take like a credit card, or actually I do have a wallpaper kit on the way. It was supposed to be here by now, but nonetheless, a credit card will work just fine to help you smooth it out. Okay, now I'm gonna take the tape off the bottom real quick here. Okay, this baby is done. All right, we're on the staging wall. So we're gonna take some photos and list this on Facebook Marketplace. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about just the whole project from really the beginning all the way until how we got here now. So you remember where this piece originally started, like before I even started giving it a makeover, I was like unsure of how to sort of make this style, this 80s, 90s style dresser a bit more modern. And what I decided to do was put it like a dipped dresser. So I painted the bottom, left the top raw wood. That didn't sell for about a month or 2. And so then I was like, back to the drawing board. Typically I have patience, but it's not that I don't have patience, but I'm just ready for this to sell. And I also wanted to let you guys know that, again, not every single piece of furniture that you make over is gonna be a home run right off the bat. So keep that in mind. Now that we've got our base on there, and it is all painted a solid color, which is Black Lace by Lily Moon Paint, which if you're interested in Lily Moon Paint, it is the most like smooth and really great finished paint that I have ever used on my furniture. So I'll link that down below. If you want to use it, FFT10 will get you 10% off. As for the base goes, I know I said I was maybe gonna do a paint wash over it, but I really like that raw pine. I think that the lighter color wood and the top darker color really contrasts well, and I think that the angled base gives it a lot more interest along with the wallpaper inside of the drawers. So with all of that being said, I am going to be listing this piece of furniture on Facebook Marketplace for more than I did the very first time I made it over. I believe right now it sits at about $450 on there, and I think that this just looks a lot more elegant and is worth a little bit more money because of the way that it looks. So I'm gonna list it at $500 to $550, and not only will that help compensate for the little bit of extra time that I put in there, it'll also just make us a little bit more money as well. So this is going to be a really interesting social experiment because I am anxious to see if this piece sells quicker than it well, didn't sell, but if it sells quicker than the other piece of furniture. So that was listed for about 2 months. So my thoughts are that this maybe will be sold within about a week, maybe 2. It is a little bit of a higher price point, so keeping that in mind, I may have to wait a little bit longer for that buyer. My market right now is just kind of wishy-washy, but again, I think this is super desirable, so I have confidence that this is going to go pretty quickly. Let's talk about the cost really quick. So the first time I made it over, I got the piece for $60 up front, and then since I only used like a little bit of paint for the bottom of the dresser, I equated for about $10 for that paint. Now that we've painted the entire thing, as well as added a base, which the base costs me about $40. So right there alone, we're in at $110. And then the black paint as a whole, I didn't even use a whole can, which those cans are 25. So let's call it $15. So $125 plus like $5 or $10 worth of wallpaper. So we'll call it in all at $130 for 2 makeovers. Not too shabby, but if I do go ahead and sell it for that $550 mark, my total profit would be $320. If you want more behind the scenes content, exclusive content, and an exclusive chat group, then head over to our link down in the description and join us over on Patreon. If you guys are interested in watching more content, click on one of these videos right here and click that subscribe button so that you don't miss an upload. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the flip side.